bloodshed. We have to remember that, the situation in Yemen, not like any other Arab country. There are tribal system there, and most of the loyalty of the people there for their tribes. So that's why it's so important. We are not talking about mass movement who have ideas, things. Definitely, the young generation who's looking for, reforms, democracy, more freedom of speech. People have the right to say whatever they want in like any other manners in the rest of the world. I'm sure it's must, and the government has to respect this and to take actions to make this work. I'm sure the kind of phone calls, messages by the friends of the president from Washington to other capitals carried very, very clear messages that demonstrators should be carry their demonstration in a peaceful way, not to be attacked. I know that at this stage the government is not getting involved directly with trying to confront demonstrators by weapon, but they are using the civil face of the army or the police to try to disperse demonstration, which is like a step. The president knows exactly what does it mean if he wants to take it further in the future.
Abdul Razak Saleh, what do you have to say to that? Are demonstrators being treated fairly, and should the West be doing more to weigh in on the fact that there's so much violence?
I think the protesters have been treated harshly. I mean, we've heard the number of killing in Aden and Sana'a, in Taiz as well. And also the tactic or the scenario that President Mubarak's security forces adopted, that now the regime is hiring tribal leaders and tribes and hiring some individuals to go and attack the peaceful protesters. And for those who talk about reforms, before we talk about reforms, they should release the political and human rights prisoners, and also allow the freedom of expressions before dialogue can start, and so people can believe them to reform. The other thing that the government or the regime has to do is to make sure that the member of their family, the two sons and also the nephews and the brothers, the half-brothers, should basically resign from their key positions in the security and military forces, because they are the people responsible for attacking, for killing peaceful protesters. And look, who is basically instigating violence? Who is the violent? Is it the protesters or the regime? It's so obvious in front of the cameras. AlJazeera is one of them. BBC is present as a witness. The violence always comes from the security forces, from the army, and from the special forces. I mean, if you look at the South, they have been protesting for the past 3 years, since 2007. Sorry. So some regions like Lahj, Radfan, Dala, Abyan, Yafa, they are under military siege. And those people are innocent civilians. We're talking about children. We're talking about unarmed people. Some people are armed, but they have not recourse to violence. They don't like it anymore. They don't want it. They want a peaceful revolution. They want to change. They want good future. They want Yemen to be for everybody, not for certain individuals. So the regime is in control. It has been in control for a very long time. It has failed catastrophically to deliver, and it is surrounded by a circle of very corrupt and unable to lead and manage a group of people, a businessman. And that's how they look at Yemen. They look at it as a private company rather than a government, rather than a civil a government that's supposed to be responsible for its people. And instead of protecting those protesters, they go against them. They are
Okay, let me start putting some of your points towards Sheikh Mohammed Abu Lahom. Sheikh Mohammed Abu Lahom, do you agree that Yemen is treated like a private company? And the other question to you would be, there's been a call for release of political prisoners and more freedom of speech. Can you see that happening?
I hope I do see that happening. I hope it should happen. It must happen. Let me assure you and assure everybody that's watching that change has come into the area. What happened in Egypt is one of the greatest revolutions, or one of the greatest things that has happened to the Arab world in the last 50 years, if not more, and Tunis, of course. And I think there is no other way that anybody can run away from change. If we do not change, change will force itself on us. And just to assure one more thing is that the use of violence, I do condemn the use of violence, whether in the south, whether in Taiz, whether anywhere. And again, I think we should learn from what happened from the thugs that used the violence, whether in Egypt or in other places. The government has to take into account that there is no use for any use of force against demonstrators. And I do call, and I hope that the political prisoners or whoever was arrested during these demonstrations will be released. But what is more important is that for all of us to get together and force the change. There is no more room for any individual or any family to control Yemen. The Yemenis, what you see right now on the streets by the youth are genuine demonstrations. We have to learn from these demonstrations, and we have to adapt to the change. If we do not adapt to the change, I'm sorry, the change will come, whether we like it or not. And this is something that we should all rally, whether on the opposition or on the ruling, or in the street, because right now we have the surprise factor. What is the surprise factor to all of us? It is the street. The street is moving things, and both the opposition and the ruling are out of reach of the street, really, until now. So let's work together, and those that will oppose, and I'm very clear about it, those that will oppose the change in the ruling will be left behind, and the will of the people will dominate the change, and that's what I hope will happen.
Zaki Shihab, it seems that all sides seems to be calling for change, but the question is how much change? And if it goes to the extreme as protesters want, where the whole regime is ousted, in Egypt it took just more than a couple of weeks. If that happens in Yemen, what kind of an issue will be opened up? What issues will there be once there's a political void there?
In fact, we're still far away from seeing the regime in Yemen in danger of about to leave. Definitely, there are so many concerns in Yemen. Long before all these movements started in the Arab world, Yemen have its own problems. To start with, it was like very clear political confrontation between the government and its opponent. There were, skirmishes and fighting and demonstration taking place in South Yemen, or what we used to call South Yemen, in many of its provinces. People asking for more like freedom of movement, for much better representation. Then we have seen the Houthis, fighting the government as well, which an issue which has like still lying somewhere. I don't think that there was a real peace settlement for this issue. Far from all this, there is the international issue, which is the threat Al-Qaeda is posing either in Yemen or in neighboring Saudi Arabia, which is definitely brings many concern, not only for regional power, but also for an international power like the United States and others, which as you can see, there were many incidents took place in the Red Sea, which have affected, the Americans' Navy movement. So it's quite important, really, to look at what kind of impact this have. The large border with Saudi Arabia, as any changes in Yemen, definitely it will have its implication on Yemen and Saudi Arabia itself, in Oman as well. So practically, it's not something easy. That's why it's so important that the